الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه ما بعد رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي اللهم لا سهل ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا سهلا. I begin by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and by sending my salutations upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, upon his family and his companions and all those who follow their way until the day of judgment. عن ابن عباس رضي الله عنهما قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لامرأة من الأنصار ما منعك أن تحجين معنا؟ قالت كان لنا ناضح فركبه أبو فلان وابنه لزوجها وابنها وترك ناضحا ننضح عليه. قال فإذا كان رمضان اعتمري فيه فإن عمرة في رمضان حجة أو نحو مما قال متفق عليه. This hadith is a very beautiful hadith. In this hadith, there is a story of a woman who came to the Prophet ﷺ, and this woman, while she's there with the Prophet ﷺ, and Nabi ﷺ asks her, what prevented you from performing Hajj with us? Now, we know that this hadith takes place after Hajjatul Wada'. So Nabi ﷺ, before he passes away, he performs one Hajj, and this Hajj is called the farewell Hajj. After he turns back from the Hajj, he asks this woman, why did you not perform Hajj with us? She gives her explanation by saying that she had two camels. One camel was taken by her husband and son, and the other camel was designated for watering the date palms of her farm. So Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam tells her that when the next year comes, the next Ramadan comes, perform a Umrah, because an Umrah in Ramadan is like a Hajj. This hadith has been narrated by Bukhari and Muslim. Some scholars have said that this hadith is specific to this woman alone. But as we know, that there is a principle in Islam which says, Al-ibratu bi'umum al-lafz la bi khusus sabab. That the point or the text, we can say it goes to the universality of that text, not the specific reason it was narrated. What does that mean? It means that we look at the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, in which he says that the Umrah in Ramadan is like Hajj. This applies to everyone in the Ummah, except when there's a dalil that tells us it applies only to this woman. So we're not looking at the reason of why this hadith was narrated, but rather we are looking at the reason, the statement of the Prophet ﷺ that this Ramadan, when you perform a Umrah, it is as if you have performed Hajj. And there's another narration of the Prophet ﷺ in which he says that if you perform Umrah in Ramadan, it is as if you performed Hajj with me. Look at the reward Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has set for making Umrah in Ramadan. This does not mean that a person who performs Umrah in Ramadan, khalas, there is no Hajj for him. They don't have to do Hajj and they perform Umrah in Ramadan and that is sufficient. No. But rather, we're talking about the reward of performing this Umrah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala set the reward so high that it's as if a person is performing Hajj. You can think about it like the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where he ﷺ says that reciting Qul Huwallahu Ahad is like 1/3 of the Quran. And if you go back to the explanation of this hadith, Mubarak Furi mentions that reciting it 3 times is like reading the entire Quran. But does that mean that we recite the Quran or recite Qul Huwallahu Ahad once and we leave reciting the Quran? The answer is no. But rather, there is a reward to unlock when you are reciting this Qul Huwallahu Ahad, When you recite it, you unlock these rewards. Same way, when you perform Umrah in Ramadan, you are unlocking this blessing and this reward. The obligation remains. The obligation of performing Hajj remains, and that will only be completed until you perform Hajj. But if you were to perform Umrah in Ramadan, it is as if you are performing Hajj with the Prophet ﷺ. The reward of performing a Umrah in the month of Ramadan, as mentioned in this hadith, is such a great reward. You think about it, the time it takes to perform a Umrah is a couple of hours. But the Prophet ﷺ has placed such a high reward for the one who performs Umrah in Ramadan. It is as if you have performed Hajj with the Prophet ﷺ. The blessing of Ramadan attached with the Umrah gives you this reward. And of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses whichever time and whichever place to reward you the way He wants. وَفَضْلُ اللَّهِ وَاسِعًا. That the fadl and the blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is vast. He may reward you for a small deed, such a high reward, and He may reward you for a great deed in a small way. This is up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The point is that when we perform this Umrah in Ramadan, this does not take away the obligation of Hajj. Hajj is still an obligation that we have to fulfill to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because every single deed we do, whether that be salah, whether that be Ramadan, fasting, Hajj, there are two components to it. On one component is the responsibility of completing that action, and the other component is the reward. So for example, if I were to say Allahu Akbar and I start praying, but my mind is going left, right, and center, thinking about my job, my work, my school, I will not be rewarded for that prayer, but the responsibility of that prayer has been lifted. Does it mean I have to go back and repeat that prayer? The answer is no. So long as I've completed the prayer, I had my wudu, I've completed the pillars of the prayer and the conditions of the prayer, then my prayer is accepted. But the reward aspect varies upon the khushu'. So same way over here, you are being given that reward aspect, but the obligation is not complete. The obligation will only be complete when you perform the Hajj. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.
يا لا 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 يا لا يا لا 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 يا لا 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 يا لا يا لا 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 يا لا يا لا يا لا يا لا لا لا